On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we will be previewing training camp, which kicks off this week. Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots podcast from the NESN Digital, beautiful NESN Digital studio here.
It's nice to be back.
It's good to be back. I am Doug Kide, joined as always by Zach Cox, and we are just off, like a 5 or 6 week vacation here?
Yeah, I think I got about 5.5.
Yeah, we both got about 5.5 weeks off because nothing was really happening in the NFL. But just as we kind of were getting off vacation, some Patriots news started to break, and perhaps the biggest news of the last few days is that people might not be tweeting at me about Malcolm Mitchell anymore because the Patriots might be trading Malcolm Mitchell in the upcoming future. He reportedly had a procedure on his knee to see why he was still having pain. He has had a very long history of knee injuries dating back to college. He didn't play all of last season, and now the Patriots reportedly could be trading Malcolm Mitchell. So, I mean, it's not the biggest news, but it's pretty significant because that's a player that Patriots fans have really come to like over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's a player, too, that really flashed a lot of potential over the second half of his rookie season back in 2016. And he's a guy, as you were saying, who Patriots fans were still kind of enamored with for all of last season, even though he didn't play in a single game. He tweaked his knee injury, or we're still not sure exactly what injury he suffered. He suffered some sort of knee injury or aggravation of a knee injury during a preseason game last year, ended up missing the entire season, returned to practice very late in the season, never made it back onto the active roster. And he's a guy that absolutely could have helped the Patriots last season, not that they ended up really needing it since their offense was so productive. But he was also a guy, I mean, we were saying during our podcast before OTAs and before the draft, kind of looking forward to this season, we were saying if Malcolm Mitchell's healthy, he absolutely has a spot on this team. Now, we don't know if he's healthy, and now, even if he is, it's not even a certainty that he has a spot on this team. In fact, at this point, it sounds like it would be actually kind of surprising if he ends up sticking around.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't totally blame the Patriots. So Mitchell played most of his rookie season. He played, I think, 14 or 15 games during his rookie season.
14 games and then 2 more in the playoffs.
Yeah, and 2 games in the playoffs. He had a big Super Bowl. But then, like I said earlier, when he was coming out of college, coming out of Georgia, he had, I think, 2 torn ACLs in college, or maybe it was 1 torn ACL and a couple other knee injuries. I think there was a meniscus injury in there. I was told at the time that the Patriots drafted him that some teams considered moving him to cornerback because of those knee injuries, just because maybe there's less cutting, less work on the knee out there at cornerback rather than wide receiver. He had actually played some cornerback at Georgia, but Patriots drafted him in the 4th round of the 2016 draft, used him at wide receiver. He had a productive rookie year, really one of the better rookie seasons that the Patriots have seen out of a wide receiver in the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady era. Then we saw him a little bit last summer, but I think he only played in 1 preseason game. Then he was shut down for the entire season on injured reserve. He came back late in the season, the team kind of hinted that he could return off that injured reserve list. He could be, one of those players that the Patriots brought off the injured reserve list, but that never wound up happening. So we actually did see him practicing, and then fast forward to this spring. It looked like he participated in the first spring practice overall of the offseason, the first OTA, because there was a picture of him out on the field. But out of all the practices that we covered, which is, I think, 5 practices, he was not on the field. So obviously something is still going on with that knee. And I don't know. I mean, what are the Patriots going to get out of as I wrote on Twitter, a 2016 4th round pick who hasn't played since Super Bowl 51? He's only suited up in 18 of 46 possible NFL games and 40 of his last 85 games dating back to college. So there's a very slim chance this guy takes the field on any given week.
Agreed, and even in the games that he did suit up for the Patriots, I mean, he, like you said, he did have a productive rookie season by Patriots wide receiver standpoint. But if you look at his game logs from that season, I mean, he's only surpassed 50 receiving yards 3 times in his career. Really, he's only had 5 productive games. I mean, a lot of these games you would see has 0 catches, 2 catches for 7 yards, 1 catch for 13 yards, which is expected as a rookie. And that's not kind of an indictment on the way he played that season. But you don't really have that much of a track record to go off of. He's not a guy that you can automatically even say, once he's healthy, he'll automatically be even a number 2 or a number 3 receiver for us. So yeah, it's hard to imagine the Patriots getting any kind of significant value for him unless some team just really likes him as a player and is for some reason really convinced that he's going to come off these knee injuries healthy. But I can't really see that.
Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about out of a trade here for Malcolm Mitchell would be like a conditional 6th or 7th round pick. I don't think you can get anything more than that out of him. And really, what it comes down to is the fact that this had to be floated out there that the Patriots are shopping Malcolm Mitchell probably shows that there aren't a lot of teams out there interested in him, because once it comes to this point where it has to be reported that guy's out there on the trade block, then I really wouldn't be that surprised if the Patriots just wound up cutting bait with Malcolm Mitchell and wave injuring him or something. Because I think that if you're in July 26th and you don't know whether a player can take the field or not, you almost just have to say like, okay, then we might as well give that roster spot to someone else that we know can take the field. Because if you can't play this summer after not playing all of last year, then like when can you play at this point? It
was also interesting to me that I believe it was yesterday the Patriots released the players that they're putting on active PUP and active NFI and all those various lists, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. Malcolm Mitchell wasn't on any of those lists.
Yeah.
You could look at that as saying, oh, cool, he might actually be more healthy than he was in the spring and than he has been last year. But that, coupled with these trade rumors and from multiple sources that basically sound like the Patriots are pretty much done with him, that's kind of not a great sign for him.
Yeah, definitely not. So let's go through the Patriots wide receiver depth chart real quick while we are talking about this. So the Patriots have Braxton Berrios, Kenny Britt, Philip Dorsett, Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, Cody Hollister, Devin Lucien, Jordan Matthews, Riley McCarron, Cordero Patterson, and Matthew Slater on the roster at wide receiver. Julian Edelman will be starting the season with a 4-game suspension. That suspension was upheld, though he tried to appeal it. So, there's not a lot of sure things at wide receiver. Chris Hogan will probably be that number 1 wide receiver heading into the season, but if Mitchell is traded, if he's released, then I think that this just further increases the chances that you'll see Kenny Britt on the roster, Jordan Matthews on the roster, maybe even Philip Dorsett on the roster. It just increases the chances of everyone behind Chris Hogan making the 53-man roster, basically.
Absolutely, because Julian Edelman will not count against the 53-man roster during that 4-game suspension, similar to what we saw with Tom Brady and Rob Ninkovich back when they were suspended 2 or 3 seasons ago. But yeah, there's a lot of depth on this list, a lot of kind of it's hard to describe what this receiving core looks like right now, because on the surface I think it is a very talented receiving core, but there's not really any sure things in this group beyond probably Chris Hogan. Chris Hogan is the closest thing to a sure thing in this group, considering how he has played over the last 2 seasons when healthy with the Patriots. I think Jordan Matthews has even before Julian Edelman's suspension, I think he had a very good chance of making this team. I think Cordero Patterson has a very good chance of making the team, especially with his kickoff ability and the new kickoff rules. And then beyond that, it's going to be a little bit of a battle between Philip Dorsett, Kenny Britt, who, according to reports, the Patriots seem to really like. He tweaked his hammy during minicamp, but seems like that's more of a minor thing. We should see him back on the field pretty soon. And then you go down the list of guys like Braxton Berrios and Riley McCarron. Patriots need someone to return punts. It's basically going to be either one of them or Cyrus Jones, unless some other candidate kind of emerges out of nowhere that we haven't really seen yet. Mm-hmm. And then I think bottom of the list there, Devin Lucien coming back, who's a practice squatter a couple of years ago. I think he joins Cody Hollister as those 2 real kind of long shots to make the team.
Definitely. Ultimately, this Malcolm Mitchell news, while it's definitely notable, and I know the Patriots fans are really high on him, doesn't really change that much for me, because I had been saying kind of all offseason that until I see Malcolm Mitchell healthy and on the field for week 1, I wasn't going to count on him. He was not going to make any of my 53-man roster projections. So I think, if anything, it just makes the wide receiver group a little bit less deep. It makes it a little bit shallower, because you don't have that hope that he could, get healthy and then come back on the field if he is traded or released. So I think that what it really comes down to is that you're going to see Chris Hogan on the week 1 roster. You'll probably see Jordan Matthews, Cordero Patterson, Matthew Slater and Kenny Britt, and then what it really comes down to is probably Berrios, Philip Dorsett, and Riley McCarron. That's basically kind of what it comes down to for that 6th roster spot at this point, unless the Patriots decide to sign someone else who's still out there as a free agent. Patriots did make some moves, yesterday on Monday. Like you said, Devin Lucien, they re-signed him. They reportedly signed safety Eddie Pleasant, and they waived injured David Jones, who was a safety who was a practice squatter last year, did not take the field at all during the spring, so he's got to have some sort of injury going on. I'm not sure when he would have suffered that, but kind of, lower roster moves there. Eddie Pleasant could be interesting. He actually has played a lot of snaps for the Texans over the last 4 or 5 years, so maybe he's a guy who could beat out Jordan Richards for a role there at safety.
Yeah, like you said, pretty low level move so far. The Pleasant signing is interesting. I was talking on Twitter the other day about how there are a lot of kind of relatively big name veteran safeties that are still out on the roster, still out on the market, between Trey Boston, Kenny Vaccaro, Eric Reed. Patriots decided not to get any of those guys, but they did bring in Pleasant, who is a name. I mean, he's been a solid, serviceable NFL player for the last 5 or 6 seasons. So he's definitely a guy that could come in and challenge Jordan Richards, who obviously Patriots fans have not been particularly pleased with over the last couple seasons.
Definitely not. And Pleasant did play pretty significant amount of defensive snaps and special team snaps last season. He played 306 defensive snaps, 245 special team snaps. So certainly a guy who's had a role on an NFL defense and on special teams. Back in 2016, it was 249 defensive snaps, 128 special team snaps. So I think that basically what I've gleaned from Pleasant is that he's a guy who is kind of a near the box, strong safety type who might come in like a big nickel package or something. So actually probably pretty similar to Jordan Richards. Yeah, but he's a guy who that I think Texans fans actually kind of liked. It seemed like they were relatively high on him as far as a reserve defensive player goes. So he's been in the league for actually quite a while, since 2012. So maybe he contributes, maybe he beats out Jordan Richards, but certainly less risk there than signing a guy like Kenny Vaccaro or Eric Reed or some of the other guys that are out there. Let's go through the players that the Patriots did put on the PUP list and on NFI. Do you have that list handy?
Yes, I will pull it up as we speak.
One guy is wide receiver that you mentioned earlier, Cody Hollister. He's on the non-football injury list. He did not participate. Did he participate in one spring practice?
I believe he was there for one, yes.
But other than that, he didn't participate in spring practices that we watched. So non-football injury must mean that injury happened off the field, whether it was during training or something that happened off the field. But so, probably won't see him for the start of training camp.
Yep, and then Brandon Bolden, who we did not see at all, I believe, in spring practices. He's on the non-football illness list, which is interesting. And then the active PUP list, which players can come off of at any time, is Kenny Britt, Cyrus Jones, Jonathan Jones.
And none of those are that big of a surprise. Britt, like you said earlier, had the hamstring injury during the spring practices. Cyrus Jones tore his ACL last season. Not back yet since that happened last preseason. And then Jonathan Jones suffered what looked like a foot injury late in the season. I think it was during the
Titans game.
Playoff game against the Titans. But he was on the field at times during spring practices. So seems like him and Cyrus Jones could come off at some point this summer. But I don't know. It's certainly notable that Cyrus Jones is starting the season on PUP, because he really tore his ACL, a week after Julian Edelman, right around that time?
Yes.
It was right around the same time period.
I believe it was the week before.
Because
his was in the Texans game, which was week 2 of the... No, his was in the Jaguars game. His was in the first... He tore his ACL in the preseason opener last year. Julian Edelman tore his in the 3rd preseason game, so 2 weeks later. And, I mean, Cyrus Jones is a guy that even if he's fully healthy, there's by no means any guarantee of him making this team. So he's definitely a player who can benefit from getting back on this field as quickly as he can. And like you said, it is a little bit concerning for him that he's still not ready to be a full participant.
Just the fact that Cyrus Jones and Jonathan Jones perhaps will not be on the field to start training camp certainly helps guys at that cornerback spot like Jason McCourty, Ryan Lewis, J.C. Jackson, some of those other cornerbacks who are competing for spots, because I don't know. I mean, beyond Stephon Gilmore, the rest of those cornerback slots are kind of up in the air. Maybe not roster spots, but just shifting which guys are going to start, which guys are going to be in the slot. So definitely a lot of competition at cornerback, and Cyrus and Jonathan Jones will probably be starting, with some other guys getting a head start on them out there.
Absolutely, and I'm curious to see what we see from Jason McCourty once we get back once the team gets back on the field here. If we see him at all. I mean, we went over this a lot in our previous podcast, but the veteran edition, basically many people kind of were projecting and maybe still are projecting him to start opposite Stephon Gilmore in that first team defense. He was present at every practice that we saw, at least during OTAs and minicamp, stayed on the field with the main team, but didn't actually do anything really, didn't participate in any of the team drills. Looked like he didn't even participate in all of the individual drills. No idea really what's going on with him, whether it's an injury. We haven't heard him been mentioned with any of these injured players on any of these injured lists or any of these rumors. So that's going to be definitely a guy that I'm going to be watching this week once we get to watch some practices.
Absolutely. Cornerback position in general, some of those other names I mentioned, like J.C. Jackson, for those who weren't following in the spring, he was a guy who really was a stud during spring practices, during OTAs and minicamp. He was starting opposite Stephon Gilmore. So it's certainly possible with guys like Cyrus Jones and Jonathan Jones starting the training camp on the PUP list, we could still see J.C. Jackson starting opposite Stephon Gilmore, or perhaps that could be Jason McCourty. Perhaps that could be Eric Rowe back in that position. Maybe if Keon Crosson's healthy now, he was a 7th-round pick out of, Western Carolina.
Yep.
Maybe he could be starting opposite Stephon Gilmore. So certainly a lot of things to watch there at the cornerback position, and with Eddie Pleasant in the mix now too. Certainly some things to watch at the safety position as well. Interesting that the Patriots waited until now to sign Eddie Pleasant rather than to bring him in before those spring practices, because similar to the other guys I just mentioned, other safeties are definitely getting a head start on a guy who's signed basically right before training camp is starting. It kind of puts him at a disadvantage there a little bit. But I'd say that it was probably a good sign that some other guys who were dealing with injuries in the spring did not or aren't initially starting on the PUP and NFI list. That would be Joe Thuney, who did not participate in spring practices, and then Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn, a couple other offensive linemen, were limited during the spring. The fact that they're not starting on those lists, probably a good sign that we'll see them at least to start training camp.
Definitely. Marcus Cannon as well was kind of in the same boat as some of those players. We really have no idea who is going to begin this season as the Patriots starting left tackle, because the top two candidates, Wynn and Trent Brown, both did not participate in any full speed drills during OTAs and minicamp, at least that we saw. And Joe Thuney, who's been the starting left guard for the last couple seasons, he did not participate in anything. So even when Isaiah Wynn was in there, he was playing left guard. We don't know if he's going to be playing left guard this season, or whether he's going to be playing left tackle, whether he's going to be a reserve for both positions. So that's definitely going to, among the positional battles, I think that has to be pretty close to number one this summer.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. I'd say it's pretty much 50-50 whether we'll see Trent Brown or Isaiah Wynn starting out there at left tackle to start training camp. We'll certainly keep you abreast of that situation. But I would guess it's going to be Trent Brown, but I don't know. It's really up in the air. Isaiah Wynn was a first-round pick, so if you want to use him at left tackle, you might as well throw him out there right away.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend. I think this depends more on Trent Brown's play this summer. I think if he comes out and proves that he can be even an above average left tackle, he doesn't have to come out there and be a superstar. He doesn't even have to come out there and play as well as Nate Solder did for over the second half of last season. But if they can put him in at first and kind of ease Isaiah Wynn along a little bit, especially because Wynn was a guy who didn't play full-time tackle in college. He played a lot of tackle, but he also played some left guard. He kind of moved around a little bit. I think if they could put him there to start and give Wynn a little bit more time to acclimate, maybe as the third tackle or a kind of a backup tackle, backup guard, that might be in their best interest. Yeah. But you never know. He could come out there and really impress these coaches, and maybe he already has really impressed these coaches. We could come out there first practice Thursday morning, and Isaiah Wynn could be out there starting at left tackle. So we're all going to see. It's going to really all shake out over the course of the next we have 2 months before the season, month and a half, something like that.
Yeah, pretty much month and a half.
Month and a half, man. It's flying.
It is flying, but I'm already kind of ready for it, I think.
I am too.
Training camp's always fun, but after a while, you're like, all right, I've kind of.
The first week and a half of training camp is a lot of fun,
yes.
And then then we're ready for the real stuff to start.
One other notable thing is that we're going to see numbers for
Maybe.
rookies.
Maybe they're
perhaps.
just gonna play with no numbers this year.
that would be one way to handle it.
It's such a weird thing that I know people have said to be like, oh yeah, this is just classic Belichick. Belichick's never done this before, at least that I can remember. At least during the time where the team has had to give players numbers during the offseason. And I love that they just put out the Patriots just put out their media guide today, 500 pages, whatever. Still doesn't have any numbers for the rookies. They're really waiting to the last minute. I mean, they have to give them at least numbers for the preseason games. So that's the latest that we can know what numbers these guys will be wearing is August 9th.
I think they have to do it for training camp. And I mean, the one that Patriots fans want to know is Sony Michel, because I think Patriots fans want to start buying his jersey.
Absolutely.
And the numbers that are available
There's not many.
in the 20s, 30s, and 40s for a running back are number 26, which might be the best option. The other one is 29. That's the only numbers in the 20s that are available.
Is number 20 available?
No, Gino Capoletta.
Oh, good call. Retired. Or
pseudo-retired. Is pseudo-retired. In the 30s, you've got no numbers available.
No number in the 30s.
In the 40s, you've got 42, 44, 45. So it's slim pickings.
It's weird, and because he's a first-round pick, obviously you know he's going to make the team. But if you go ahead and give him number 27, then that's kind of a bad sign for say, Ryan Lewis, that the first-round pick took your jersey number. Probably means that the team doesn't have a great sense that you're going to be making this team.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point. We could see him handed 22, which is Jamal Wiltz's number, 27, which is Ryan Lewis's number. 30. I don't know. There's some other 39 they could give him, but there's also the possibility, we're getting really far down this rabbit hole, that he could be given a number like number 45, and then he could switch it later to a number of a player who has since been released, because Dante Hightower started out his Patriots career wearing number 45. Teddy Bruschi started out his Patriots career wearing number 45. I think some other players in the past, who were first-round picks, started with the numbers that they didn't actually wind up with keeping. So we could see that happening with him, but I don't know. If I were him, with the numbers that we've mentioned, I would probably take either number 22 or number 27. Those are probably the best possible numbers for a running back.
I would say
26 isn't bad.
They could give him number 1 this preseason.
They could.
D'Angelo Bentley, my boy, wore number 9 during the preseason a couple years ago. He was a cornerback. Obviously not allowed to do that during the regular season under NFL rules, but they seem to be a little more relaxed. I think fans would buy a Sony Michel number 1 jersey, even if he could only wear it for a month.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Patriots are a team that rarely does that.
Yeah.
Rarely gives guys who don't wear single-digit numbers during the preseason. Usually they like to double up on numbers. But that was one of my favorite things as a kid, when I would watch a Seahawks preseason game in 1992 and watch wide receivers out there wearing number 6 or number 8 or 9. It was always just very odd and off-putting, but also kind of interesting and fun. And other teams still do that. I think the Seahawks are a team that still does that, and they give wide receivers numbers in the single digits when they won't be able to keep those.
Yeah, I remember when Brian Cox came to town when I think I was 10 at that point. Obviously, I was interested because no relation, but he got the name. You're a 10-year-old. You see a little Cox jersey out there. They gave him number 0 during the regular or during the preseason, because I think it was because he demanded to wear number 51 and he couldn't get he was negotiating with the player who wore it, something like that. But he wore number 0 all throughout the preseason, which I just thought was awesome. I tried forever to buy a Brian Cox number 0 jersey and couldn't find one.
That's actually incredible. I actually completely forgot about that, but there is photographic evidence of him practicing in a number 0 jersey. That is incredible. And there's actually a picture of him wearing it too, right?
Yep.
There it is.
The big neck roll and everything.
So maybe Sony Michel starts off with number 0. We'll see. Or maybe Ryan Bojorquez, the punter. Maybe they can give him number 0 or something. But I think that pretty much covers our pre-training camp podcast here that we're throwing out there. It's Tuesday right now. We will be at Gillette Stadium on Wednesday because Bill Belichick is speaking at 8:30 in the morning. Then we'll talk to some players. And then Thursday is when things kick off. We won't be watching any padded practices until, the weekend? I think they can't hold
Yeah.
padded practices for at least a few days.
The first couple are always, more basically the same, a continuation of the same kind of stuff we saw in the spring until it really heats up.
I think Thursday and Friday will be unpadded practices. Maybe we'll see the pads come out on Saturday or Sunday. And then Monday is the night practice at Gillette Stadium. They say that's for season ticket holders, but in the past, when I've covered this, they've let anyone who comes to the Hall of Fame ceremony go into the stadium. So just a little tip out there. You could watch, who's getting inducted? It's
Claiborne last year?
Claiborne was last year. It came down to Vrabel, Richard Seymour, and someone else, and I think it's this. Oh, Matt Light. Matt Light's getting inducted.
Yes.
So if you go to Gillette Stadium on Monday night to watch Matt Light get inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame, then there's a good chance that you could go into the stadium to watch the practice because that's the way the Patriots have handled it in the past. But I'm not making any promises, and it might be fun to just watch Matt Light get inducted anyway. So come to Gillette Stadium. It'll be cool. I think that'll do it for us. We will be back soon after the first few days of training camp to tell you everything that we are seeing out there as far as depth chart goes and who's standing out, who's not standing out, who's been released, who's still there, and all those good things.